The purpose of this video is to expand our creative horizons and discuss what are, if any, be potential, hypothetical, utopic, perfect worlds, right? Where utopia is defined as follows: it is a world or status of being for civilization where human suffering is minimized and human happiness is maximized, like Sam Harris says. Now, right off the bat, you can imagine that that is a very extensive, that's pretty vague, that can include in a very extensive, very long, multifaceted lists of all kinds of possible worlds, some of which, we might want to live in, some of which we probably wouldn't want to live in. Anyway, and the purpose, in this video, I'm just going to suggest one world that I would want to live in. And again, the purpose of this is to sort of be creative. And, if you really sort of slow down and think about it, you can imagine all sorts of really cool, hypothetical, perfect worlds that society would honestly do a lot better being in. Now, of course, a completely perfect world, I have to point out, is impossible. It's asymptotically not possible. You can achieve a sort of asymptotic, close state to perfect happiness, but not, totally get rid of all unhappiness. That's simply the nature of reality. But see, that's really not the point. The point is to maximize happiness, to get us as high up on that scale as we can. And the first model that I'm going to suggest here is a model for a utopia which is run by the Empathy Virtue and Minimalist instincts. First, so I want you guys to imagine that what we're doing right now is we are essentially like gods. We have this sort of mainframe computer over here, and we have all of these sliders that we can alter. Like, there's a slider for the level of technology that this world has, a slider for, the level of religion that it has, a slider for the human virtues that it has, and sliders for all the various kinds of variables that you can alter and that would affect the way the world works. So there's a huge number of sliders, because there's a huge number of variables. But this is basically what we're in control of. And obviously there's a slider for the human population. So let me start off with the human population. Now I'm going to suggest that the human population is constant. It does not change, it does not increase, it does not decrease. What we're going for is a population that is at most at the carrying capacity of the Earth, and possibly, preferably less. Now, of course, this would be a world where the level of technology is much higher than it currently is in our world. This is a world where, maybe several hundred years into the future, right? It can't be too far into the future because, of course, the technological singularity, if you've studied some computer science, you might have heard of this term, is sort of when we come up with artificial intelligence. And I would say that it's not actually possible to predict what would happen that far into the future, but we can predict things sort of before that point, more or less. We can make, reasonable predictions as to how things can be within some kind of error. We can't, obviously, because of chaos theory, we can't predict the exact state of being for every particle, but we can predict the overall state of being for a lot of the, the economy, the government, etc., the level of technology. So the level of technology is going to be a lot higher. And the population is constant. Now what that means is, and this is very, very important, the whole model rests on this precipice, which is human beings are immortal, right? Human beings are immortal. Now, the way that works, if you're wondering, is technologically you can come up with synthetic organs that don't fail as human organs do, or you figure out a way to maintain human organs past death, and I'm pretty sure the human brain can live for hundreds of years. It's just that the body doesn't, and that's why the brain shuts down. There's technological ways of keeping cells and human beings alive. There's even technological ways of keeping your cells alive even past the point where the the laws of thermodynamics say that they should break down. This is obviously possible, right? This is one thing I don't like about a lot of science fiction, is that they have a very inaccurate, I often think, very inaccurate view of the future. You know, a lot of science fiction has this whole thing where human beings are still mortal in the year, 2,500 or something, or in like Star Wars, and to me that's not going to happen at all. You know, the first thing we're going to do, that technology is going to come up with, is a way for human beings to remain immortal. There should be no old people or no aging in the future, because of course this is something that's technologically possible, and even if it's not economically feasible to keep the human body alive, you could always figure out a way to download your brain into a computer and stay alive in that. And there's a whole lot of issues connected to that, and that is complicated, but it is possible for people to remain perfectly alive. So the fact that you have all the science fiction where that doesn't happen, I've always thought that to be completely unrealistic. There's going to be huge demand for people to remain immortal, right? And so this is definitely something that's going to come into existence. In our hypothetical utopia, this is a central pillar. The technology that allows people to stay alive indefinitely is basically everywhere throughout the society. Now, what the technology actually is indeterminate. I can't say what exact solution. I would imagine that it's going to be something along the lines of synthetic cells and synthetic organs, synthetic tissue, so that a person's cells don't actually die, and their brain can continue to live on, at least for centuries, within this synthetic body. And when I say synthetic, I mean it's artificial. Not that it's not made out of carbon matter at all, or that it's made out of that it's robotic or necessarily made of metal, although there would be metal involved, but it's synthetic biology, again, which is really complicated. It can look and feel exactly like normal biology, like normal cells. It's just synthetic, like Cylons in Battlestar Galactica. I'm sort of getting off topic, but trust me, when I suggest that this technology is possible. And then the whole point of this whole exercise is to imagine possible worlds, not impossible worlds. So this whole thing is possible, to have people alive. Now, of course, you might wonder, well, what the economic cost of keeping a person alive is. Well, I imagine it's a lot less than having to raise a new person, because, if you're basically, if a living being dies, then you have to invest a whole lot of money of raising a new living being, raising the child, and then you run into the whole problem. If people want to live forever, how, you basically have to convince people to let themselves go and die and let their children carry on. So that's not even going to happen. There's not going to be any children in this world. There's not going to be any there's not going to be any new people in this world. What there is going to be is immortality, which is a huge, huge point, because it really changed the way people look at a lot of the issues. Now, there's immortality in terms of technology. The technology is also at a level where most mundane jobs can be replaced by technology. Such things as factory workers may not even exist, because these are things that can be done basically by machines. Even today, that's almost the case, but they're still factory workers. But for instance, even like basic retailers, at a coffee shop, there's a guy who can pour your coffee. That's not going to be a job in this hypothetical world, because a machine can pour your coffee for you, and a machine can be some sort of human-like hologram to make you think that it's sort of uncanny valley type thing, and this machine can have a greeting and smile and whatever. It could be a robot, is my point. So that's just a brief overview of the level of technology that you'd have. We could go into detail about the specific things that you do in this world. You're an average person in this world, right? So you can be any race. You can be black, brown, white, whatever. You can be male, you can be female. You're going to be living in a small, living area. Probably not much bigger than this room. Well, actually, no, it would be bigger than this room. It would be quite a ways bigger than this room. Well, it would depend on the number of people, but it would be bigger than this room. You would have access to a bathroom. You would have access to a kitchen, although if you have synthetic organs, you probably don't need a bathroom, at least not a toilet. And a lot of the fundamentals of your living space are provided to you for free. Electricity, that is something that is provided to you. Water, that is something that is provided to you. Lighting, heating is provided to you. The building itself is provided to you, all for free. You get some basic clothes, all for free. You would get, obviously, internet access for free, and some basic technology, all for free. Now, by the way, how everything got to this point, that's very complicated. I know I'm not even going to try and answer that. But that isn't the purpose here. The purpose is just to discuss the state of the world as it is. So all human needs, food provided to you if you need food, although if you're living in synthetic organ land, then you can probably just like plug yourself into the wall and recharge. But see, food is still going to exist because there is some value in experiencing taste and the nuances of taste, and so that food itself can still exist. Food is not actually going to become obsolete even if you don't need food to keep yourself alive. So what are the things that you're going to do in this world? Well, let's suggest, for instance, that since everything's provided to you, you don't actually have to do anything. You don't have to go help anyone. Let's imagine for a second that you don't want to go do anything, you don't want to go help anyone. You just want to stay in your little living area and do various things. Or you can obviously leave your living area and do various things. So what are the things that you can do? Well, for one, you have access to the internet and all of the joys that includes. You can play video games, you can read books, you can watch movies, you can watch YouTube videos, you can do all sorts of neat stuff like that. You also have access to all this new technology that we don't have yet today, known as virtual reality technology. And virtual reality technology it's going to be some kind of machine that you can plug yourself in. You can plug yourself into this machine and you'll be able to experience, entire scenes, events, locations, areas as if you were really there. Or at least that's how graphically advanced this virtual reality will be, right? I mean, it's like a video game, pretty much. So if you want to experience the life of a opulent, rich individual of the 21st century, you can do that. If you want to experience the life of a poorer person back in 500 AD or something, you can do that as well. You can do anything you want within what the virtual reality can supply. It's going to be less realistic, obviously, than real life. You can also venture outside and you can play sports. You can play football, you can play tennis, you can go out and do all kinds of sports that people do. You can travel, you can mountain climb, you can explore sort of the national parks and the nature conservation areas and all of the wild territories of the world where humanity has more or less no effect, or we more or less don't do anything out there. You can go visit, the North Pole, for instance, or Mount Everest. And of course, it's going to be very easy to climb Mount Everest as well because of all the technological advancements that will make it easier to not die as you climb Mount Everest. So it's going to be a pretty neat world. You can do a lot of stuff. You will even be able to travel to Mars, for instance, through interstellar travel and explore Mars, as there's going to be efforts on Mars that try to terraform it and make it sort of a livable planet. You could even travel to the moons of Jupiter or beyond and stuff like that. Maybe even there would be sort of faster-than-light travel will somehow be invented, and you could travel to Alpha Centauri, or the next sort of livable planet that's within like 20 light years. I think the closest livable planet to Earth is like 20 light years away, and it has a surface temperature of like 20 degrees Celsius. You can travel there. You can do all sorts of stuff. Now that stuff is obviously going to be expensive for this society. But the point is, you can go anywhere, you can do anything. You don't have that many restrictions as to what you can do. This is all within the confines of you don't actually want to contribute to anything. The one criterion is that, for this type of situation, is if you don't want to contribute to anything, is that you operate by a few moral laws. For one, you are a minimalist. You don't necessarily want to contribute to anything, but you don't really want to expand your dominance over anything either. Right? You have your little living area, which isn't too big. It's a minimalist living area. You don't want too much, in other words. You don't want to live in a huge mansion. You don't want to, blow cocaine off a hooker's ass or something. You don't want to do crazy stuff. You don't want to do too much opulent, superficial, shallow stuff. You just want to, stay in your little hole and do your thing, which is fine. You could want to interact with people. You might want to sort of go to parties and stuff like that. Also fine. What you don't want to do is tax the world more in terms of resources, more than you already tax it. There's also this thing called the empathy virtue. Now, this is a tenet that you live by. And this is actually a place where I agree with Sam Harris, where he talks about human motivations, and he says how intentions are important, and I totally agree. Intentions are important. In fact, they're probably the most important thing, and the only thing that you can standardize within human morality. Now, you live by the empathy virtue, which means that you have empathy for other human beings, and you always will have empathy for other human beings. Now, what that means when having empathy for other human beings is that you are willing to sacrifice some of this personal minimalist comfort you have if it means enough to some other people. You are willing to do this. You're willing to do this because this is simply how you are wired. That's the point of the empathy virtue. The empathy virtue also means that you are compassionate, you're loving, you don't want to exploit other people, you want to be nice to other people, you're not going to go out and try to offend other people, you're not going to you're not going to put up a sign anywhere that tries to insult people, you're not going to try to bully, etc. You get the idea. You are loving and compassionate to the point of self-sacrifice. To the point of some self-sacrifice where need be. Now that's just... So obviously there's going to be a sector of the population that lives in this perpetual state of just leisure, where they don't really contribute to anything, but they don't really... all they do sort of is consume. And that's fine, right? Because again, a lot of the jobs are going to be fulfilled by technology. Now, of course, there has to be a sector of this world where everything... there's going to be a sector of this world where people are producing actual goods, right? Because if for the people who just want leisure to have fun, if you want to go play tennis, you need tennis balls. Who's going to make those tennis balls, right? There's got to be some production centers and factories and individuals and societies and organizations that obviously manage all that stuff. Now, how are they going to work? Now, the idea, ideally, is that they all work voluntarily. Everything is done through complete 100% voluntarism. Now, most of this is really easy because all of the bad jobs, the jobs nobody wants, are going to be taken care of by technology. And this is a fine point, by the way, because some people might believe that technology will solve everything and that human beings can just always be in a leisurely state. That is false. It's false because, and I realized this recently, but it's false because as the level of our technology increases, we also have to maintain that technology. I mean, if you study computer science or computer systems, you know this. There's tons of bugs and glitches and problems. There's got to be people that constantly update software and update hardware and maintain and upkeep because machines will break down, etc. It's a very complicated process. So long as there's technology, there will be people required to maintain that technology. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that the jobs that people will have more jobs to do. On the converse, I think it means people will have fewer jobs to do still, even though there's going to be a lot of technology to maintain. The reason for this is probably because maintaining technology is probably a lot easier than actually having to do the work without technology, right? Maintaining the technology, like bug fixing and replacing old tech when it's with sort of new tech when it's worn out, isn't that hard, and it probably doesn't take as much time than just being at the assembly line and doing some work there. So, there's still going to be engineers, there's still going to be electricians, there's still going to be all sorts of individuals that solve problems. There would still be doctors, even though most surgeries could probably be done by some kind of very smart robotic arms. Now, where are these people going to come from? Well, for one, these people are going to be in the same state as the leisurely individuals. But of course, these people will actually want to be the engineer and the doctor and the whatever. The reason for that is because they can. Some people naturally do enjoy that type of work. That's why they gravitate towards that type of work in real life. Now, obviously, there's working conditions and issues that plague them that make their work not so fun to do. But it's not like they're going to have to work 8-hour shifts every day. It's not like they're going to have to come to work at 9, leave at 5 every goddamn day, like for 5 days a week. No. I mean, if anything, working hours could probably be decreased to like a few hours a week. Maybe up to like 20, 15 hours a week, right? Because all they're doing is making sure that things run properly. If there's a bug, they have to fix it. If there's an error, they have to somehow solve it. If there's faulty technology, they have to fix it. And all of that is totally doable because, again, these people are highly educated, very intelligent, and most of all, they enjoy solving problems. And all of the work that they're doing is so it doesn't take that much time, so they have plenty of time to engage in leisurely activities on top of this. So the organizations and the factories that provide all the citizens with water and with electricity and food, etc., all these things have to be monitored and managed and maintained. There's going to be people who will actually want to do this. Now here's the thing: if people don't want to do any of these jobs, because certainly some of these jobs may be more boring than others, well, then they're going to be replaced by people who do. Because everybody in this world lives by the empathy virtue, which means that if you are someone who is living in this world, you are ready to contribute to one of these jobs because you understand that this is a job that is needed. If there is a demand for such jobs, then people will inevitably flock towards them because people live by the empathy virtue, right? People are willing to sacrifice years of their life, maybe even more, and hours of their week of leisure in order to do this job to keep society functioning and running. Why? Because of the empathy virtue, right? And remember, these people are immortal, so it's not like they have dreams or things that they need to fulfill within 60, 70 years before they die. No, they live forever. So it's totally expected for you to be willing to contribute, because what else are you going to do? I mean, honestly, sitting at home all day for 24/7 will get dull for people. That's why people will go out and do other things, They'll go do volunteer work. They'll go help out at the animal shelter, or they'll go help their community. Maybe they'll go help the ball factory that produces tennis balls so that they can play. And the reason they'll go to all these places could be tons of reasons. Maybe they enjoy the community there. Maybe they like the people. Maybe they like the work itself. But people will always seek to engage themselves with something. The thing is, everything they choose to do will be 100% voluntary because they all want to do it. And they all want to do it because no matter what, all of their needs are supplied. So basically, this entire world has this sort of two sectors of humanity. There's the sector that's in leisure, and there's that isn't working, and there's the sector that's employed, sort of providing the leisure, providing the needs for all of society. And the way it works is because everyone lives by the empathy virtue, and everyone's a minimalist, and everybody's willing to contribute, and would actually want to contribute because, again, being unemployed, sitting at home all day, not that much fun, what they're going to do is this sector right here of the people who aren't working, what they are is they are an excess supply of workers, right? Because there's only so many jobs that need to be filled, and there's all of these people over here that are willing and capable of filling them. So if ever there is a need for jobs over here in this sector, in the employment in industry, within industries, then all they have to do is address the sector of unemployed people, and the unemployed people will flock there. And any person will be able to do any job because, of course, this is a highly advanced, highly technological, highly intelligent society. You know, you can learn job skills pretty quickly. You'd be able to, you know, study and learn things on your own because you're going to have a lot of time. Education systems, if they even exist, if you even need them, maybe you could learn things just by plugging, you know, some kind of device into your head. Who knows, right? That stuff doesn't even matter that much. The point is that it'll be very easy for industries or organizations to acquire the people that they need to perform certain jobs. So, you know, the other things we could talk about is the management of these organizations, right? Because who's going to manage these organizations? Well, obviously, managing an organization is just another job, and there's going to be someone who wants to fulfill that job, right? And someone's going to go fulfill that job and manage the organization. And eventually they're going to manage it, and eventually they're going to stop, because eventually they're going to get bored of managing and go on to doing something else. You know, let's talk about art. You know, people in this world will obviously want to create art. You know, if you want to write a book, you can obviously do that on your own within your little living environment. If you want to make a video game, you could do that too with just a computer. In fact, that's a lot of what's happening now. A lot of indie games today are being produced by very small groups, very small teams. Sometimes it's one guy or only a few guys together, and they create indie games that are so good that other people flock to them, and then they start going up to making bigger and better projects, right? I mean, just look at Minecraft for a good example, right? So people, you know, this type of thing is going to constantly happen. If you're one of these people who wants to create a really big video game that'll require like hundreds of people to contribute, then all you're going to have to do is you're going to have to work hard enough, make some smaller video games first, and eventually someone's going to notice your work, and someone's going to want to join you to make a really big video game, right? Right, and the same thing for film, right? If you're someone who wants to make movies, you can start by making short films with your friends or with other people who are interested, which you'll be able to find because the world is going to be full of these people, and you can always find them through the internet or whatever. And then you can go on to making bigger movies, or you have a really good idea or a really good script and someone wants to make that into a bigger movie, and then people will flock together and coalesce and come together to make these bigger projects. So it's going to operate like a complete, utter, total free market, honestly. Total voluntarism. That's what's going to happen in this world for art. So the art is just going to be like another form of industry. There's always going to be people who want to do it. There's always going to be people who, you know, sort of go there. And there's always going to be people, there's always going to be a demand for more people to go there. And so the people within the unemployed sector will flock there if need be, because being unemployed isn't that much fun, right? Now, the only difference with this world is that the way everything is produced isn't produced with the intention of making profit, right? Notice at no point in this did I say that there should ever be any kind of profit, right? And the reason for that is because profit in this world is something very different. It's not monetary profit. It's idea profit, right? It's the type of profit where you can do an even better job, right? Like, for instance, if you're someone who wants to make a really good video game, a AAA game, what you have to do is start off small, right? And you start off small and make some small indie games, short indie games, and people really like those indie games, then your profit is, in a sense, the fact that other people now recognize you and notice you and acknowledge your skill, that you can go on to making an even better product. That is, in a sense, what your profit will be, right? There's not going to be any currency in this world. There's not going to be any money, because you're not going to need any money, right? Basically, anytime you want to get anything for yourself, you know, for instance, you want a customized t-shirt or certain clothes, is that you could always get that stuff if you contribute someplace else. You know, if you contribute to the production process yourself, or sometimes if there's already people who are contributing and producing that stuff, then you can just get it totally for free. Because again, technology takes care of a lot of the problems that people have, right? So it's going to be a pretty ideal, perfect world, right? Now, of course, you might wonder, well, someone can obviously abuse this world. You know, what about management positions? Well, here's the thing. No person will actually stay in any single position that they have for longer than, say, a decade. No individual who says, well, you know, I want to go manage this hospital, or I want to manage this. Obviously, there's going to be a government, because there's going to be a group of managers that manage there's going to be a group of people that manage the issues that concern the entire world. For instance, where ensuring that all the technology that runs the light, the water, and the electricity and the heating systems keeps running, right? That's all going to be monitored and managed by some kind of organization. There's going to be an organization that manages if there's a need for a military, if there's some other alien race that we have to confront, if interstellar travel is something that sort of a government type organization would control, or there could be terraforming other planets is something that a government organization would control. Sort of long-term big problems that concern the entire species, because obviously, we're living on this planet. This planet has a finite number of resources. Eventually, we're going to have to move off of this planet and go someplace else. Obviously, there needs to be an organization that manages all that, right? But the thing is, there's not going to be any corruption because, again, everybody lives via the empathy virtue. Everyone's a minimalist, and the most important thing about this is that it means that nobody holds any position of power longer than, say, a decade, or longer than a few years. There's no such thing as sort of a grouping, confinement of power. There's organizations that exist, but the people who run them constantly fluctuate and constantly goes from one group of people to another, right? And the reason for this is, it's not even the fact that people are forced to do this. It'll be the fact that, first, this is going to be culturally sort of expected, that you're not going to go be an engineer at some factory for more than like 5 to 10 years, or you're not going to be a doctor at a hospital for 5 to 10 years, unless, of course, there's a very high demand for doctors and hospitals or engineers. And the reason for that is because no individual, no human being would actually want to do any of these jobs for more than 5 to 10 years, right? I mean, the way things work today is very different. People are motivated by making as much money as they can because what they're trying to do is satisfy their own needs and the needs of their children. But remember, this isn't an issue in this world because there are no children and everyone's immortal. So the only thing you have to do, and again, all your needs are satisfied by all the technology. The only thing you have to do is satisfy your own leisure, satisfy your own desire to perform certain tasks, right? So if you want to be an engineer, you can go on and go fix some machines or whatever. Or if you want to do some kind of menial job, perhaps some physical job, you can go do that. But you're not going to want to do that forever. Eventually you'll get bored of doing that. Eventually you're going to go want to do someplace else. I mean, I think for most people it's the case that they want to sort of spread their interests around. They want to, they'll, watch movies for an hour, then they'll go play sports, then they'll go, work at the hospital or something, It'll be very sort of diverse and chaotic like that. There's not going to be this confined 9-hour work day like it is today, right? It's going to be very, very diverse. And the reason it's going to be diverse is because there's going to be enough people and they're all going to be perfectly qualified and to do all this, and technology is going to be there to take care of anything when human beings aren't around. So, if you want to be part of the government or to be part of and run some of these factories or organizations, you can do that. But you're not going to do that for more than a decade, because why would you do that for more than a decade? You're going to get bored of it for that long. Eventually you're going to say, you know what, I'm tired of this. I want to go do something else. I want to go climb Mount Everest, or I want to go make a video game, or I want to go just chill in my house and, smoke marijuana. There's no end to human desires, but the whole point of human desires is that they fluctuate from one thing to the next. At this point in time, I want to play a certain video game. This other point in time, I want to go help my community, right? And contribute to my community. And this is how people work, right? So once technology is at the level where this will be a viable living sort of paradigm, then this is exactly what people are going to do, right? There's no... The difference with things today is that people are driven entirely by superficial needs and by physical need. They're either driven because they need to put food on the table, or they're driven because they just want to have a big house and feel good about themselves. But these desires simply won't exist in this world because everyone's immortal, right? Like, you don't live for 70, 80 years where what you're trying to do is maintain a large house for yourself, right? Like, nobody in this world would actually want to live in a giant house because, you could obviously want to live in a giant house, but it's like, if you live in a giant house, you'll eventually get bored of that. That's not like a long-term goal, right? A giant house. Everyone's a minimalist, remember, because they understand that superficial needs aren't fulfilling needs, right? Like, certainly there might be people that'll want, I want to live in a mansion, but they won't actually exist because people who will want to live in a mansion, anyone who really wants to live in a mansion will realize that that desire is so shallow that it won't actually, it'll actually be satisfied very quickly. As soon as you live in a mansion, you'll be like, oh, okay, I'm in a mansion, what do I do now? As soon as you build yourself that mansion, what are you going to do after you live in it? Once you've lived in it for a month, you're going to get bored of it by then. You're going to want to do something else. What are you going to do with the rest of your time? Well, your options are to, engage in leisure, help out your community, create art. Those are your three options. And that's what everyone's going to do because that's the only thing left to do, right? These are the only things people can do. So what are they going to do in this world? Again, the whole sort of distinction, then the thing that makes this all so interesting is that this all follows from the fact that people are immortal. If people are immortal, then they won't ever be motivated by trying to accrue as much wealth at once because your wealth isn't going to... Wealth today is sort of a very genetic, very evolution-driven effect. It's people who want to acquire wealth so that they can live comfortably and their children can live comfortably. But in this minimalist world, everyone already lives comfortably, right? And it's this living in comfort thing is totally guaranteed. So it's like, at no point would you ever want to accrue wealth because you are going to live for another hundreds, maybe thousands of years for all you know. What is wealth going to give you in these hundreds of thousands of years? Whereas what you could do is learn to dance, or learn martial arts, or go out and climb Mount Everest, or go travel to Mars and see what that's like, or write a book, right? Develop skills that will take thousands of hours to perfect because you have thousands of hours of free time. There's no point in spending and trying to accrue wealth when wealth isn't something that you're really going to remember hundreds of years in the future. You're not going to remember, 1,000 years because you're immortal, right? You're not going to remember in 1,000 years all of the wealth you accrued back in this decade. No, you're going to remember, if you wrote a really powerful novel, or if you learned how to be a magnificent dancer, or you learned how to be the best martial artist that there is, right? The whole point of this world is that needs are satisfied, so the only thing people have left to do to motivate them is self-actualization. The only thing that people can value is what they will value, and the only thing they can value is self-actualization and intimacy with other human beings. So of course people are going to look for close friends and family and wives and girlfriends and stuff like that as well. But the point is, at no point are you actually interested in acquiring any kind of vanity because you sort of understand that there's no point. Vanity is something that doesn't reward itself, right? You're not gonna... It's not... You can constantly acquire more and more vanity, but all it is just vanity. It's just physical, superficial stuff. What you could do instead is engage yourself in creating art or creating science or something meaningful, powerful, because that stuff is stuff that is literally endless in its appeal. There's always going to be the need for more art, there's always going to be the demand and desire for art, and there's always going to be a demand for scientific progress. The demand for these goods and these products is infinite. The demand for vanity is not that infinite. Even your own personal demand for vanity, right? So this is sort of how this world's going to operate. Now, obviously, you can't have a huge mansion in this world, within reason. I mean, it depends on the number of people. You know, obviously, if there's 10 billion people and there's no room for a mansion, then because of the empathy virtue, nobody's going to want to build a mansion, because they're going to understand that if they do build a mansion for themselves, then there's not going to be, then somebody else is going to suffer. There's going to be less room for, you know, the others, the other human beings that they have to share the planet with. So nobody's going to want to have a huge mansion, but if there's like 6 or 7 billion people in this hypothetical world, then maybe everyone would be able to live in a mansion. And that'll be totally okay as well. And everyone could actually achieve this desired result. And they can customize their mansion in whichever way they feel like. But you sort of get the idea. It's everything's going to be very diverse and variable. People can have whatever job that they want, because there's always going to be people can have whatever job that they want, because anytime that there's a demand, there's going to be people who are willing to meet that demand. And the people who have jobs have no real reason to hold on to the jobs any longer than to the point at which they feel satisfied, because they're not driven to supply themselves with resources that they need to survive. That isn't a human need, because resources are supplied to everyone. So no one's going to keep a job longer than to the point where they feel personally satisfied. And then they're going to leave that job, and then somebody else can come take that job. So it's going to be a sort of a very fulfilling, voluntary world. Now, what you would actually call this world, whether you'd call it there's definitely voluntarism involved, but would you call it a free market or a capitalism or communism? I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems that it would be something like anarcho-communism, from the looks of it, because there would be sort of giant organizations that control the core systems of humanity, and then everything else is voluntary. And even the people who run these organizations is totally voluntary. And the thing that maintains the whole thing is minimalist empathy virtue. People aren't trying to upset other people. They're not trying to develop products or develop goods for themselves that go to the detriment of other people, so you get rid of that effect entirely. And people are trying to help other people if other people need help, and therefore you have community and volunteering, and then everybody gets what they want, pretty much. Now, of course, all of this boils down to the empathy virtue, and you could ask, well, how do you get the empathy virtue, right? Because at no point during this thing did I actually try to answer. Somebody turned on a lawnmower. At no point in this did I try to answer, how do we get to this point? I don't think that matters that much. I mean, achieving the empathy virtue could be complicated. It can be a matter of genetics, honestly, because I think like Socrates or whatever said that you can't actually teach people virtue, in which case it is totally a matter of genetics, in which case the only way to attain it is through some kind of selective breeding. But if not that, then you always have to teach people virtue, and honestly, I feel like a lot of these issues would happen simply from people being immortal, because being immortal, I think, puts things in a perspective. You're not going to be chasing sort of superficial, opulent objects of vanity, because there's no reason to desire that stuff. That stuff is... it's sort of very temporary. It's not memorable. People are always going to chase things that are memorable in this world. You know, things that are engaging and things that are memorable. So art, science, and doing a job that fulfills their desire to fulfill that kind of job. If they're a problem solver, they can be an engineer. They can, if they really want to help people, they can be a doctor. Who knows, right? You get the idea. So this is a possible hypothetical utopia with voluntarism, and I would honestly say anarcho-communist sort of utopia is what this essentially is. whether we achieve this, it would be nice, but again, the main sort of issue here is with the main criterion for fulfilling this world, I think, is technology more than anything else. Well, okay, it's technology, it's also people's virtues, because if people don't have the right virtues, they will abuse technology and they will try to make themselves the emperors of the human race if allowed to, which isn't what you want, right? So it's virtues and it's technology. These are the two pillars. Now, obviously, you can build a society on something else other than that. But I'm not of this opinion that, like, that the political system is that important. I mean, I think that any political system could work, assuming that people have virtues. If people are virtuous, then any kind of government would be a good government. You know, give or take a few bureaucratic issues and problems and stuff. But that stuff aside, any government system would be perfect if people were not corrupt or corruptible, which is only possible if people accept virtues, right? Would you say it's sort of changing human nature? But I don't agree. The idea that that absolute power corrupts absolutely is a ridiculous, like, falsehood that is only something that people have observed because narcissists and sociopaths and malign individuals that do not have virtues often gravitate towards positions of power. It's not because power itself has an effect on people. At least that's what I've observed. So, I mean, I totally don't agree with that entire sentiment. I think it's totally possible to build any kind of government that we'd all be satisfied under. Assuming that the people who run this government are sort of virtuous, healthy, proper individuals. Anyway, that's one example of a utopia in a nutshell. And hopefully this was an interesting exercise for you as it was for me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to come up with other utopias that might be interesting to think about. And remember, the definition of a utopia is that minimizing human suffering. So hopefully most people would want to live in the utopia I just explained, but what I'll try to do in the next time I do this utopia thing is I'll try to come up with an example of a utopia that people might not want to live in for obviously other reasons. It would still satisfy the definition of having minimized human suffering and maximized human happiness, but it would still not be some ways you want to live, and we'll try to see why. Anyway, that was all for that. Cheers!